Commander Aaron Malik had always believed deep space was quieter than people imagined. Out here, time didn't just slow, it stretched. It forced the human mind to face itself. But today, that silence felt heavier than usual at the Terran Alliance deep space. Listening post. The room buzzed softly with the hum of scanners, blinking consoles, and the distant vibration of the station's engines. Malik stood near the central display, hands behind his back, watching the same streams of data that appeared every day. Nothing ever changed, at least. Not until now. Malik was a man shaped by duty, raised on stories of humanity's reputation across the galaxy. Humans weren't seen as fragile or serene like other species. They were children of a harsh world, storms, predators, disasters, extremes. Because of this, humanity had earned a name. At first it sounded terrifying, even insulting, but humanity embraced it. They survived because Earth demanded strength. They adapted because they had no other choice. Yet despite their fierceness, humans were not cruel. They were protectors. Their history was both violent and compassionate, and Malik carried that duality with pride. Power meant nothing without purpose, and purpose was nothing without empathy. As he walked the rows of consoles, his officers monitored signals from across the vast sectors of Alliance territory. 99% of the time. The transmissions were meaningless ancient echoes or cosmic noise. But the remaining 1%, that 1% could save lives. A soft alarm interrupted the quiet routine. Not loud, but unusual enough that the officer at the console sat up straight. "Commander, I think you should see this." Malik approached. A weak, irregular waveform pulsed across the screen. The officer increased the volume, and static flooded the room. At first it was only noise, but then, beneath the distortion, a voice emerged, trembling, afraid. "Run translation," Malik ordered. The computer worked hard, decoding bit by broken bit. Seconds felt like minutes. Finally, a mechanical voice repeated the message. "This is the Valeri. We request assistance. Our cities are falling. Please, whoever hears this, help." The room froze. Even the steady hum of the station seemed to fade. The Valeri. Gentle, peaceful. Artists and diplomats. A species with no armies, no enemies, and a homeworld that had never prepared them for violence. If they were sending a distress signal, something catastrophic was happening. Distance. Malik asked quietly. 9 sectors. The signal's weak looks like damaged equipment, but the distress pattern matches Valeri protocols. Before Malik could respond, another transmission arrived, barely holding together, heavy static, voice cracking under terror. "They are breaking through. We cannot hold them back. Please help us. We are dying." The signal cut out. A cold weight settled in Malik's chest. A distress call wasn't just a message, it was a responsibility. Ignoring it could mean the extinction of a civilization. Responding meant risking Terran lives in an unknown conflict. Malik turned to his officers. "Prepare a full report for the Terran Council. Highest priority." Within minutes, the Council appeared on the communications screen, leaders from Earth and the human colonies. Cautious and calculating. "Commander Malik," the chairwoman said, "explain your assessment." "The Valeri are under attack," Malik stated. "Their signal is genuine. Whatever they're facing, it's overwhelming." "Do we know the source?" another asked. "No, but the fear in their voices." "No enemy fabricates something like that." Councilman leaned forward. "You understand the risk of sending our Deathworld fleets that far from Alliance space?" "Yes. But doing nothing would stain humanity's honor. What if it's a trap?" The chairwoman pressed. "It could be," Malik admitted. "But if it's real and we ignore it, an entire species may die." The council fell silent. Malik could see the conflict in their eyes. Risk versus morality. Fear versus responsibility. When the call ended, Malik stood alone, looking out at the stars. So many civilizations lived out there, some peaceful, some hostile, some terrified and alone. He wondered what role humanity would choose to play. Footsteps approached. Lieutenant Rhea, his second in command, stood beside him. "Do you think they'll send help?" she asked. "I don't know," Malik said softly. "I hope they remember what it means to be human." "They helped us once," Rhea reminded him. "During the Mars drought, saved thousands." "Yes, they did." "Then we can't abandon them." Malik nodded. He felt the same. But the choice was not his to make. Hours passed. Malik tried to rest, but the broken voices from the transmissions echoed in his mind. He imagined the Valeri homeworld families hiding, cities burning, children crying. Every image only strengthened his resolve. Humanity had a decision to make, and time was running out. Finally. In the middle of the night cycle, the council's seal flashed on the screen again. Malik hurried to answer. The chairperson appeared. "Commander Malik," she said, "the council has made its decision. Prepare to mobilize your fleet. You will respond to the distress call." Malik exhaled slowly, relief washing over him. "Understood, Council." But she continued, "You must exercise caution. We do not know the enemy. Do not rush blindly. Assess the situation before engaging." Malik nodded. "We will proceed with wisdom and strength." When the call ended, he tornadoed his officers, their faces filled with a mixture of fear and pride. They knew what this meant. They were going to rescue a peaceful species from an unknown threat. They were heading into danger, but they were also doing what humanity believed in: protecting the vulnerable. Malik felt a renewed sense of purpose as he walked through the station, giving orders to prepare the fleet. Ships were powered up, weapons checked, engines tested, and supplies loaded. The death world of fleet was waking from its calm. Soon, it would carry humanity's fury across the stars, not for conquest, but for justice. And far away, on a distant world filled with fear, the Valeri still waited, not knowing if anyone had heard them, but humanity had, and they would answer. The death world of fleet was being prepared, but the weight of the mission grew heavier with every passing hour. Commander Aaron Malik walked through the docking bay, where hundreds of engineers and soldiers worked non-stop. Sparks flew from welding tools, engines roared during testing, and the entire place felt alive with urgency. Yet beneath that energy was a quiet fear, one they tried to hide behind disciplined faces. Everyone knew they were gentle, calm, and almost too kind for the harsh universe around them. They lived in floating crystal cities, believed in diplomacy over violence, and never harmed anyone. Hearing their desperate tackles for help had shaken the humans deeply. Humanity was fearsome, but they also had empathy rooted in their history. Malik saw that empathy in the eyes of his crew as they prepared for war. He paused near a group of young soldiers, checking their armor. They looked strong, confident, but Malik could sense their unspoken questions. Who was attacking them? How dangerous were they? And most importantly, would humanity reach them in time? Malik knew these questions himself, though he kept his face calm. A leader had to be solid, even when uncertainty surrounded him. Lieutenant Rhea approached him, holding a D. Her expression was serious. "Commander, we've received the second transmission analysis." Malik felt his chest tightened. "Show me." Rhea tapped the pad and a shaky recording played. The image was poor but clearer than before. A Valeri elder appeared tall, gentle, with shimmering blue skin. His voice trembled as he spoke, and the sound was filled with fear that are destroying everything. "We have tried to negotiate, they do not speak. They do not listen. Please, if any species hears this, we are losing hope." Behind him, buildings were collapsing. The sky flashed with bright streaks, energy, weapons, explosions, fires. A group of RE civilians ran past the elder, screaming. Then the transmission cut abruptly. The recording ended. Insolence filled the space between Malik and Rhea. Malik clenched his jaw. No sign of the attackers. Not yet. Rai replied. The signal didn't capture them clearly, but whatever they are brutal. Malik stared at the datapad screen for a long moment. "Send this to all fleet officers. They need to understand what we're facing." Rhea nodded and left. Malik turned toward the massive bay window overlooking the Valeri system, was far farther than. Most Terran rescue missions had gone. It lay beyond several unsettled regions known for storms in subspace, where navigation was unpredictable and dangerous. The journey itself was a threat, but Malik had already made up his mind. No distance was too far when innocent lives were at stake. The Council's approval had given humanity permission to act, but many political leaders still worried. They debated among themselves, questioning whether Earth had the right to interfere in this conflict. Some feared that responding might drag humanity into a larger war. Others argued that ignoring the Valari would damage humanity's reputation. Malik wasn't interested in politics. He only cared about the faces of those frightened Valeri children in the transmission. They deserved hope. They deserved someone to fight for them. He loafed the bay and stepped into the strategy room where his senior officers waited. The holographic table in the center displayed a projected map of Terrigen between the listening post and Valeri territory. Blue lines marked possible travel routes, but most routes were glowing red with warning symbols. Chief Navigator Halson stood near the display, rubbing his forehead. "Commander, subspace storms are increasing across this zone. Traveling through here will slow us down. If we try to avoid them, we'll lose even more time." Malik examined the map carefully. How long will the fastest route take? With current conditions, 7 days minimum, and the slowest, 10 to 13 days, re-auded. "Commander, if the Valeria being attacked by a species capable of overwhelming them this quickly, their homeworld may not survive 10 days. Malik nodded. "Then we aim for the 7-day route." Halson looked uneasy. "Sir, Thattrot is the most dangerous. We could lose ships." Malik placed a steady hand on the table. "We might lose ships. Beautif, we take the safer paths. We might lose an entire civilization. Which loss is greater?" The officers exchanged grim nods. They knew Malik was right. The decision felt heavy, but there was no other choice. That as preparations continued, rumors spread across the fleet. Soldiers whispered about the attackers. Some believed they were operates. Others thought it could be an ancient enemy species resurfacing. A few feared it might be the Wreathkar, a race known for brutal conquest. Though no one had confirmed this, the uncertainty made everyone tense. Humanity had fought many enemies, but an unknown one was always the most frightening. Malik returned to his quarters briefly to gather his thoughts. He sat on the edge of his bunk, looking at an old photo he carried everywhere his family standing on a beach back on Earth. His sister had once told him, "If you're strong enough to fight, you must also be strong enough to protect." It lived by those words. A soft knock came at his door. It was Dr. Alina Voss, the fleet psychologist. Her job was to support soldiers' emotional well-being. But she often spoke to Malik when she sansed. He carried too much on his shoulders. "You look exhausted," she said gently. Malik attempted a small smile. "Long day." She sat across from him. "You feel responsible for the Valeri, don't you?" "I feel responsible. Are everyone who sends a plea for help," Malik answered. "If we are able to act, we must act." Alina studied him. "But you'll so fear what we're heading into." Malik didn't deny it. "Yes, because I don't know what we'll find when we arrive." Alina nodded thoughtfully. "Fear isn't weakness, Commander. Fear is what keeps you careful. What matters is that you're still willing to go." Asterisk. He appreciated her words. They reminded him that leadership wasn't about pretending to be fearless. It was about making the right choice despite fear. Later that night, Malik walked along the main corridor. It was quieter now. Most soldiers were resting or finishing final tasks. The soft lights cast long shadows on the floor. Suddenly, he heard 2 young technicians talking behind a corner. "Do you think the Valeria is still alive?" One whispered, "I hope so." The other replied, "I heard their cities are made of crystal towers, peaceful, beautiful places. They don't deserve this." "No one deserves this." Malik continued walking, pretending he had never heard them. Their words echoed his own thoughts. The next morning, the fleet gathered in formation outside the station. Dozens of massive warships floated in the darkness like metal giants. Their hulls glowed faintly with blue lines of energy. They were humanity's pride fast, strong and terrifying in battle. The very sight of them would make most enemies hesitate. But today they launched not to conquer, but to save. As Malik boarded Thekaman's ship, the Resolute, he felt the atmosphere shift. The soldiers saluted him with sharp discipline. Their eyes reflected determination. They were ready. They were afraid, but they were ready. The bridge hummed with activity. Officers took their stations and screens lit up with data. Malik stood in the center, hands clasped behind him. "Status," he asked. "All ships ready," Rhea reported. "Engines at full power. Course is set for the 7-day route." Malik took a deep breath. This was the moment where a decision became action. Begin launch sequence. A deep vibration rolled through the ship as the engines ignited. Outside, the fleet moved as one Forminga, long coordinated line. The stars stretched before them like a dark ocean that, as the fleet accelerated, Malik watched the stars blur into streaks. The journey had begun. Hours turned into days. The 7-day route proved to be as dangerous as predicted. Subspace storms swirled around them like invisible tornadoes, shaking the ships violently. Sometimes the lights flickered and alarms rang. Malik and his crew held their breath whenever the storms grew stronger. A single mistake could rip a ship apart. During one severe storm, a smaller escort vessel drifted to Closato, a gravitational anomaly. Malik watched to scream with dread. The ship was being pulled in like a toy tractor beam. He ordered the Resolute locked onto the ship, engines straining for 30 tense seconds. The metal creaked and warning sirens BL, but finally, the escort ship was pulled back into safety. Malik exhaled. One ship saved, but how many more dangers awaited them? Every night, Malik replayed the Valeri distress signals in his mind. The voices, the fear, the collapsing cities. He imagined the attackers growing closer to wiping out the Valeri completely. That thought fooled him. On the 5th day, a new piece of data came through an automated Valeri beacon that had been drifting through space. Malik's heart raced as the analysis completed. The beacon contained a warning. The WH, they are coming. They will not stop. The name hit the bridge like a silent explosion. The Rethker were not just conquerors. They were known for leaving nothing alive. Malik felt a chill. The enemy was worse than he feared, but the revelation only made him more determined. There was no turning back now. The rising challenge had become clear. Humanity was racing not just to help, but to stop a monstrous force from erasing a gentle civilization. And time was running out. The 5th day of their journey was the hardest yet. The Deathworlder fleet had passed through the majority of the subspace storms, but the farther they went, the more dangerous the space became. Commander Aaron Malik stood on the bridge of the Resolute, his eye scanning the endless star field ahead. The holographic maps projected warnings of unknown debris fields, unstable gravitation zones, and erratic energy bursts. Every reading suggested one thing. The Valeri homeworld lay at the edge of a region no one dared to enter without risking everything. Yet Malik did not hesitate. His heart was focused in the Valeri, their fragile voices, the image of their cities in flames that haunted his thoughts day and night. Thefleet moved as a single organism, responding to Malik's commands with precision. Each ship was a masterpiece of engineering built to endure the worst space could throw at them. Yet even the best technology was no match for an unknown enemy that could strike without warning. The officers on the bridge worked tirelessly, monitoring every sector, scanning for signs of Thurath, the feared aggressors whose reputation alone could unsettle the strongest humans. Then it happened. A faint signal flickered across the communications array. At first, it was just a whisper buried under cosmic noise. Malik's pulse quickened. He instructed the communications officer to amplify the signal. The bridge filled with static, and then through the crackling. Distortion came a sound that made every officer tense. "Screams, Commander." "It's the Lieutenant," Rhea shouted. "They're still alive." But barely. Malik's jaw tightened. Helen forward, listening closely. Among the cries were instructions and warnings from Valeri elders. They described Thenomi's advance, the collapse of infrastructure, and the chaos consuming their cities. The recording was fragmented, but the message was clear. The Rathkar were methodical, cruel, and merciless. They had no interest in negotiation. They would destroy everything in their path. "Plot their last known coordinates," Malik ordered. We moved directly toward them. All weapons ready. Prepare for immediate engagement if contact is made. The fleet shifted into battle formation, a display of humanity's readiness for war. Even in their hurry to save lives, the precision off the fleet was undeniable. Humans had trained for decades to respond to threats like this, and yet nothing. No one was prepared for the sight of a civilization under siege. As the fleet approached the coordinates, the signs of destruction appeared. An Ari city was visible in the distance, its crystalline towers shattered. Some had collapsed completely, and others were burning. Smoke rose upward, blocking the weak sunlight of the system. The sight made Malik's stomach tighten. He had seen war before, but never destruction on this level. Small groups of Alari civilians ran across open plazas. Some carried the few belongings they could save. Others tried to defend themselves with basic weapons, which were useless against the Rethker's advanced technology. Fleet sensors detected massive energy signatures moving toward the city. The Rethker were advancing rapidly, using precise strikes to destroy buildings and kill anyone in their path. Malik felt anger, but he kept his voice steady as he addressed the bridge. He ordered the crew to lock onto every Rethker vessel and target their command ships first to disrupt their control systems. After that, they would provide ground support. The mission objective was clear: protect the civilians at all costs. The battle began before they reached the city. Energy weapons flashed across space as the human fleet engaged the Rethker. Ships maneuvered through debris, firing with accuracy. The Rethker were aggressive, but they had never encountered humans fighting with such coordination. Each ship struck where the enemy was weakest and protected the fleeing Valeri from above. The Rethker flagship appeared, large and threatening. Malik focused on it immediately. He knew that destroying the flagship was the key to saving the city. He ordered the preparation of a strike team. Lieutenant Rhea coordinated with fighter squadrons, guiding them toward the flagship while larger ships provided cover. The fighters moved through explosions and enemy fire. Some ships were damaged, but none withdrew. Every pilot was committed to saving lives. On the ground, Valeri civilians panicked. Families ran through the streets, carrying children or whatever they could salvage. The Rethker dropped explosives that caused buildings to collapse and sent shockwaves throughout the city. Small groups of Valeri tried to resist, but were completely outmatched. Malik continued issuing orders. He instructed crews to deploy rescue pods, focus on hide-in-city civilian areas first, and root shield systems to protect groups of civilians. He demanded that all fire be controlled to avoid harming innocents. The fleet responded with precision. Rescue pods formed protective shields around fleeing families, and human soldiers engaged Rethker ground forces carefully and strategically. The battle continued for hours. The Rethker attacked repeatedly. Malik's bridge received reports of destroyed enemy ships, damaged human vessels, and civilians being rescued. Despite the chaos, the human fleet remained determined. Everyone understood that failure meant the extinction of an innocent species. Then the critical moment arrived. The Rethker flagship attempted to escape, likely to call for reinforcements. Malik knew that if it escaped, the conflict would continue for much longer, and more Valeri lives would be lost. He ordered all units to converge on the flagship and fire on his mark. He instructed them to target the engines and the command bridge simultaneously. The fleet focused its fire. Energy beams struck the flagship repeatedly. Explosions spread across its hull, and alarms sounded through its systems. Malik coordinated with the fighter squadrons to attack weak points. Finally, a massive explosion occurred. The flagship began to drift, unable to maneuver. Other Rethker ships hesitated. Without leadership, Malik ordered the fleet to push forward and clear the skies for evacuation. Rescue pods moved faster, guiding Valeri civilians to safety. Families were lifted from rooftops and rubble. Some cried, others were in shock, but they were safe. The Rethker retreated to the edge of the system. The humans did not pursue. Their priority was to secure the Valeri survivors. The city was heavily damaged. Streets were filled with debris, and fires burned across shattered structures. Even so, families reunited and began to rebuild shelters with help from human engineers and soldiers. Malik walked across the command deck, observing the exhausted crew. Words were unnecessary. They had succeeded in saving the Valeri, but the threat was not completely gone. The Deathwor would return if given the chance, and humanity had to be prepared. Malik watched the first groups of Valeri being transported to safety. He felt both pride in his fleet and sorrow for the destruction they had witnessed. Lieutenant Rhea reported that the critical phase was over and the Valeri were safe for now, though the enemy would not give up easily. Malik agreed and said they had prevented total destruction and protected innocent lives. He examined the holographic display of retreating Deathwor forces. He began planning the next steps for defense and recovery. The crisis moment had passed, but the consequences of the battle were still unfolding. Humanity had shown strength and compassion. The entire galaxy would take notice. After the battle, Malik stood on the bridge of the Resolute and looked out at the destroyed Valeri cities. Crystal-like towers were fractured or collapsed. Fires sent dark smoke into the atmosphere, creating a strange mix of light and shadow. The Deathwor were still in the system, and would not surrender easily. The fleet formed a protective perimeter around the surviving cities. Fighters patrolled low orbit. Every movement was calculated. This was no longer just a rescue mission. It was a full defense operation. Malik gathered his senior officers around the holographic display. Damage reports and survivor locations appeared in real time. Engineers and tactical officers worked together to secure the RI and eliminate the Deathwor threat. The bridge was filled with the sounds of machinery, warning signals, and officers giving updates. Lieutenant Rhea reported that the remaining Deathwor fleet had regrouped at the edge of the system and were likely preparing a counterattack. Their numbers were reduced, but they remained dangerous. Malik asked for their count, and Rhea informed him there were around 20 large warships with several smaller attack craft. Malik took a deep breath and prepared for what was coming next. Breath. We cannot allow them to regroup. We hit them now with full force. Our priority remains the Valeri, but we cannot risk letting the enemy live to strike again. The fleet shifted position, moving in a coordinated strike formation. Every ship's weapon systems were online, targeting data transmitted and cross-checked in real time. The human fleet was faster, more agile, and more disciplined than the Deathwor expected. Malik knew that the enemy relied on shock and terror, but they had not encountered humans willing to fight, not for conquest, but for defense. As they approached the enemy, the first wave of fighter squadrons detached from the larger vessels. Pilots, young and experienced alike, maneuvered with incredible skill. Weaving between fire streams and debris from destroyed ships, the Deathwor fired relentlessly. Their energy weapons slicing through the darkness of space, but human shields and countermeasures held. Explosions erupted in vivid bursts, lighting the black void with flashes of red, blue, and gold. Malik's voice was calm, but his commands were sharp. Focus on the lead ships. Disable their engines first, then their weapons. Avoid unnecessary destruction. We are not here to kill. They will not stop their attacks. But we must control the battlefield. Despite the tense calm, the first casualties occurred. One of the smaller escort vessels took a direct hit from a Deathwor plasma canal. Alarms blared as the ship's hull began to breach. Malik's heart sank for a moment, but he quickly refocused. Deploy emergency drones. Stabilize the vessel. Pull them back into the perimeter. No one is left behind. The human crew acted with urgency and precision. Drones sunleapt the damaged ship, repairing structural weaknesses and redirecting energy to keep it afloat. The crew inside worked feverishly, and after tense minutes, the vessel regained stability. Malik exhaled quietly. Each life save reinforced the resolve of the fleet. Meanwhile, the Deathwor flagship, massive and heavily armored, became the focus of the fleet's attention. Malik knew that taking out the flagship would demoralize the enemy and disrupt their coordination. He directed multiple capital ships to engage it simultaneously, coordinating their attacks with the precision of a symphony. Beams of energy collided with its hull, forcing it to maneuver erratically to avoid total destruction. Fighter squadrons targeted the flagship's weapon systems. Each pilot knew that failure could cost lives, but a determination in their eyes was unshakable. They dove through barges of energy fire, dodged explosive debris, fired concentrated bursts at weak points identified by Malak's tactical team. The flagship shuddered under the assault, sparks flying from damaged engines and alarms screaming across its decks. The battle was chaotic, violent, and mesmerizing. Yet despite the destruction surrounding them, Malik maintained focus on the ultimate goal. Saving the rescue operations continued simultaneously with combat maneuvers. Pods descended through the planet Satmashar, collecting survivors and lifting them to orbiting transports. Human soldiers on the ground, Ngaga Drechker, forces with precision strikes, clearing streets and protecting the fleeing civilians. Malak could see Thefir in the eyes of the Valeri, but also the relief as humans shielded them from harm. Then came the decisive moment. The flagship attempted a desperate escape maneuver. Aiming to flee the system and regroup, Malak's tactical men calculated the odds and possibilities. He issued the command. All units converge. Do not allow the flagship to live. Focus all energy on disabling engines and control systems. Precision over power. Disable it. Do not destroy it. Energy beams converged from multiple angles, striking with exacting accuracy. Fighters weaved around defensive fire, striking critical systems identified by Malak's sensors. The flagship groaned, systems failing one by one. Finally, a massive energy feedback loop caused the ship to lose stability. It drifted helplessly, engines offline, weapons, Doda. The Rekar forces scattered. Realizing their leader could no longer coordinate the fleet, Malak's eyes scanned the tactical display, noting each retreating vessel. Hold position, he commanded. Monitor them, but focus on rescue first. With flagship neutralized, the Valeri rescue operation intensified. Human forces worked tirelessly to secure civilians from collapsing buildings, burning streets, and abandoned war zones. Every family was a priority, every child a mission. Pods and transport ships swooped in, out of danger zones with calculated timing, shields glowing as they lifted the terrified Valeri to safety. Balak allowed himself a brief moment to look out at the planet below. Despite the devastation, life was being preserved. The streets that had been battlegrounds were now filled with hope. Survivors carried the wounded, and human engineers began setting up temporary shelters, medical stations, and energy shields to protect vulnerable areas. The city, though scarred, was not lost. Humanity had intervened in time. On the bridge, officers reported continuously. Evacuation is 90% complete. Ria said, remaining civilians are in isolated zones, but we're reaching them. No casualties among human forces beyond the meaner hits we sustained earlier? Malak nodded. Relief mixed with exhaustion. Continue until everyone is safe. We will not leave until the last Valeri is secured. Even as the immediate battle ended, Malak knew vigilance was critical. The Rathkar had been defeated in this engagement, but they were not eradicated. Their retreat was strategic, not accidental. Humanity had proven its strength. But the enemy would return if given the chance. Malak's mind raced with strategies for defense and monitoring the system to prevent further attacks. Meanwhile, small groups of Valeri began to emerge from hiding, their eyes wide with awe as humans helped them navigate the ruined streets. Some whispered, thanks. Others wept openly. Children clung to human soldiers. Some afraid, some fascinated by the strange beings who had arrived from the stars to save them. Malik observed quietly. He had witnessed said countless conflicts, but seeing the relief and hope in the faces of those rescued never failed to move him. The medical teams on board transports worked tirelessly treating injuries. In offering comfort, human engineers assessed damage and began fortifying structures to prevent further collapse. Everything was done systematically with precision, but with care. Malik could see that humanity's presence was not just military. It was protective, reassuring, and compassionate. After hours of coordination, the city's emergency zones were cleared. Every survivor accounted for, every vulnerable area stabilized. Malik allowed himself to finally sit, leaning against the bridge console. His body ached from tension and exhaustion, but his heart was lighter. Humanity had phased the critical moment, engaged the enemy with overwhelming force and precision, and emerged victorious in their mission to save the Lieutenant Rhea, approached him quietly. "Commander, the flagship has been disabled. Their remaining Deathwor are retreating, and the civilians are secure. The critical moment is behind us." The resolution is swift. Malik exhaled slowly, closing his eyes briefly. "Yes, today we did more than fight an enemy. We saved a civilization. Humanity acted not out of fear or pride, but out of duty. We were the shield they could not have, and we will remain vigilant until the threat is gone completely." He looked out at the city one last time before turning back to the tactical display. Even in victory, Malik knew the consequences of this battle would shape the future. The Valari were safe for now, but the war was not over. The Deathwor would remember this defeat, and the galaxy would see humanity's strengths. Malik allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection, knowing that every decision, every maneuver, and every act of courage had led to this resolution. Humanity had shown its true power, not through conquest, but through protection. And as Malik watched the first Valari begin to rebuild, under the watchful eyes of human soldiers and engineers, he understood that this was only the beginning of a longer responsibility. The battle had been won, the critical moment survived, and the resolution achieved, but the galaxy had changed forever. Humanity's prince was now undeniable, and their commitment to defending the helpless had been proven beyond question. And Commander Malik knew that, despite the exhaustion, despite the loss and the devastation, the fight to protect life and hope was worth every risk taken. Asterisk. The battle had ended. The Deathwor were in retreat, and the Valari had survived. Yet the air on the Valare homeworld felt heavy with both relief and sorrow. Commander Aaron Malik stood on the observation deck of the Resolute, looking down at the cities that had been partially destroyed, but now were filled with cautious hope. Smoke still rose from fractured towers. Fires burned in isolated areas, and rubble littered the streets. But life was returning. Valera families were moving slowly through the streets, carrying what they could salvage. Humans worked alongside them, lifting debris, erecting temporary shelters, and providing medical aid. It was a scene of recovery, but also a reminder of how close destruction had come. Malik's mind replayed the last days in relentless detail. The distress calls, the chaos, the desperate faces of children hiding in collapsing buildings. The relentless advance of Thurith Coral of it was vivid. And yet, in that memory was also the strength of humanity. The fleet moving with precision, the soldiers rescuing civilians under fire, engineers stabilizing structures as explosions shook the ground. He felt pride, but also the weight of every life lost or endangered during the engagement. Leadership carried responsibility, and he felt it fully now in a way that would not leave him easily. Lieutenant Rai approached quietly, holding a datapad filled with the latest reports. "Commander," she said softly, "All surviving Valari have been accounted for. No human casualties beyond minor injuries. Evacuation and rescue operations are complete. They are safe for now." Malik nodded, his eyes still on the horizon. "Good," he said, though Theward felt insufficient. Good was the safety of lives, but it could not erase the fear, the destruction, or ephemeries of the Deathwor attacks. Still, it was a beginning. Humanity had made the difference between survival and extinction for the Valarian that mattered. Small groups of Valari approached the humans with cautious gratitude. Their shimmering blue skin reflected the soft sunlight, and their eyes, wide with lingering fear, were filled with hope. Many whispered thanks in their melodic language. Some left gifts of flowers or delicate crystal ornaments, gestures of deep appreciation. Soldiers smiled politely, some nodding, others simply offering a hand to guide the frightened children. For many of the Valari, This was their first encounter with humans, and the memory would be imprinted forever. Malik watched his children, once cowering in fear, began to explore again. Their steps were tentative at first, but as humans offered gentle guidance and reassurances, they ran freely through the safer streets. Humans had saved them not through magic, but through courage, technology, and determination. It was a display of humanity's dual nature, its capacity for destruction, and its ability to protect. Malik felt a profound sense of purpose. This was what Teet meant to be human, to wield power responsibly, to act when it was needed most, and to defend those who could not defend themselves. Medical teams were busy in makeshift clinics. Burn treatments, bandaging, and minor surgeries were performed quickly and efficiently. Doctors and engineers coordinated to restore water systems, provide shelter, and supply basic needs. Food and clean water were distributed to the survivors. It was not just recovery, it was restoration of hope. Malik made sure his team remained present. Watching the human and Valeri efforts merge, every human action communicated one truth: we are here for you. As the first night fell, the Valeri homeworld felt different than it had the day before. The fear had not disappeared, but it was tempered by relief. Fire still glowed in the distance and smoke rose from crumbling towers. But the streets were filled with cautious movement rather than panic. Malik walked through the command deck, observing the calm coordination of the fleet and the planetary operations. The soldiers were attired, yet they remained vigilant, aware that the Wreath car could return. Their dedication impressed him. But it also reminded him that heroism often demanded endurance beyond fear or fatigue. He paused to speak with several soldiers who had been on the ground during the rescue. One young fighter, barely 19, recounted a scene of saving Avery family trapped under rubble. Malik listened carefully, nodding at every detail. The boy's hands trembled slightly as he spoke, but his pride in the rescue was evident. Malik reminded him that every action, every risk, to Kento save lives, mattered more than any personal fear. Meanwhile, engineers were repairing essential infrastructure. Bridges, water systems, and communication towers were reinforced. Temporary energy shields were deployed to protect the remaining crystal structures from falling debris or any potential follow-up attacks. The human presence had transformed fear into a sense of security. Slowly, the Valeri began to rebuild. They were gentle and delicate beings, not built for war. Yet they now moved with determination, encouraged by the humans who had fought to save them. Malik knew this mission would be remembered for generations. History would recall that humans, often feared as Deathworlders, had chosen compassion over conquest, protection over destruction. Yet he also recognized the complexity of the message. Strength without purpose is chaos, but strength with purpose can save civilizations. Humanity had shown both their power and their morality in action. As night deepened, Malik took a moment to walk through the temporary shelters erected for the survivors. Families huddled together. Children slept with blanket-shelled clothes. Elders whispered quietly to each other. Humans moved among them, offering aid, listening to fears, and providing reassurance. Each interaction was small, yet profoundly significant. Every life saved reinforced the meaning of the mission, and Malik felt the weight of responsibility that came with it. The Valeri elders gathered for a meeting near the largest safe zone. They had begun discussing how to rebuild their world, and Malik observed quietly from a distance. They were gentle beings, their language filled with soft melodic tones. Despite the trauma they had endured, they showed resilience. They were not warriors by nature, yet under the protection of humanity. They had survived one of the most violent attacks in their history. Malik understood that this was a true victory, the preservation of life, culture, and hope. Later, Malik returned to the bridge to review the tactical situation. The Wreath fleet had retreated to Thejas of the system, likely to regroup. The immediate threat was gone, but vigilance remained necessary. Sensors were adjusted to monitor for signs of return. Every officer knew that the galaxy was vast, and threats were always possible. Yet, for the first time in days, there was a feeling of relief, of accomplishment, of having done the right thing. As he watched the Valeri rebuild below, Malik reflected on the mission as a whole. Humanity had responded not out of fear or pride, but out of duty. They had acted with speed, precision, and compassion. Their presence had transformed despair into hope. He realized that the battle had tested more than strength. It had tested humanity's commitment to the principle that power should protect, not destroy. This lesson would remain with him, and with every human who had participated in the rescue in the following days. The Valeri began to express their gratitude, Maria Panley. They offered small gifts, sang their songs of thanks, and shared stories of their civilization. Malik walked among them occasionally, witnessing firsthand the fragile but growing bond between humans and that children laughed again in the streets, playing among the temporary shelters, their innocence slowly returning. For the first time, Malik felt a sense of peace. Humanity had been the shield when it was needed most, and their intervention had allowed life to continue. Yet Malik remained vigilant. The Rathkar were not defeated completely. Their fleet survived, and they would remember this battle. But humanity's presence had changed the equation. The message sent across the galaxy was clear. When the helpless cry out, humans answer. They do not conquer without cause, but they protect without hesitation. Malik knew that this reputation would resonate, creating both respect and caution among other civilizations. Late at night, Malik walked alone on the observation deck, looking at the stars. Each point of light represented countless worlds, some peaceful, some dangerous, and some unaware of the threats lurking near them. Humanity's actions had not only saved one civilization, but had sent a broader message across the cosmos. Strength carried responsibility, and every life mattered. He thought of Booth Valeri, children he had seen rescued, the families reunited, and the elders beginning to rebuild. This mission had been more than a battle. It had been a statement of moral purpose, a testament to humanity's ability to rise to any challenge. Malik felt acquired pride, tempered by the knowledge of what could have been lost. Many lives were at risk, and the stakes had been enormous. But humanity had prevailed, and in doing so, they had fulfilled a higher duty. Thesters stretched endlessly before him, but he no longer saw them as cold, distant points of light. They were reminders of life, of responsibility, and of hope. By the time the first light of a new day touched, the Valeri city's life was slowly returning to normal. Temporary shelters were filled with laughter and conversation. Human soldiers and engineers continued to assist, and the survivors began tentative steps toward rebuilding their civilization. Malik watched it all quietly, understanding that the mission's true victory lay not in the destruction of the enemy, but in the preservation and recovery of life. The Valeri would never forget Humanitas Intervent. They would remember the courage, the protection, and the compassion shown by beings they had once. Only known in legend. And humanity, for its part, had learned a lesson as well. True strength is measured not by theonomies one can destroy, but by the lives one can save. As Malik prepared reports for the Terran Council and coordinated follow-up operations, he allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The fleet had performed beyond expectations. The Valeri were alive, and the Rathkar had been driven back. The mission was a success, but its meaning went deeper than tactical victory. Humanity had chosen responsibility, bravery, and compassion over fear, hesitation, and passivity. And in doing so, they had proven not just their power, but their purpose. Commander Malik finally stepped away from the bridge, his eyes lingering one last time on the recovering Valericities below. He knew challenges remained and vigilance was required, but the aftermath of the battle had shown him something essential when humanity acts with courage and conscience. Even the most desperate cries for help can be answered, and hope can flourish against the darkest odds. The Valeri homeworld was scarred, but it endured. Lives had been saved, bonds had been formed, and humanity's presence had left an indelible mark. Commander Malik understood that this mission would be remembered for generations. As a turning point where fear was met with courage, where despair was met with protection, and where humanity proved that even the fiercest warriors could be the gentlest guardians. And as the sun rose over the shattered but resilient cities, Malik allowed himself to believe that this wasn't at the end, but a beginning. Humanity had answered the call, and in doing so, they had shown the galaxy the true meaning of strength, duty,